Hello, hello. This is Adina from Immigrant Finance, and I am here today with Victoria Matey from the Shot of Truth podcast. Welcome, Victoria. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. I'm so looking forward to our conversation, and I got a chance to speak with you earlier to think about some things, and there was so many wonderful things you were saying. I was just like, save this for the podcast.
I know there's always some really great stuff that you get when you first get to connect with somebody. I
Yeah,
totally get that.
because you've been having a podcast for quite a long time now, right? So yeah, tell us tell us about your podcast and what you do.
Yeah, of course. So I created Shot of Truth podcast about 3 years ago this month
Yay,
with a
congrats.
couple of friends. And it was really just kind of like a passion project at the time, really trying to kind of expand some of the work that I was already doing around speaking and working around educating folks around at large, these public safety narratives, talking more about detention centers, kind of opening up those conversations in spaces like higher education. And the podcast was really a way to kind of keep doing that work. And little did I know it would turn into something completely different and connect me with so many amazing people like yourself. So
Um,
I'm stoked to be doing this work. But it was like a whole 360 or like totally different from, what I was expecting going into all of this work too.
yeah, I that makes sense. I know when I first started seeing your page, I kept seeing things pop up in my feed, and I was like, "Damn, this person has some stuff to say that's really important." And you were talking about some of the really hard stuff in the immigration space that not a lot of people are aware of. So I was very intrigued, and I think the name of your podcast is so on point because is that kind of where what you were thinking of, just kind of bringing the truth bombs out and talking about some of the hard stuff?
It's really funny because when I started, I was working with a co-host and we were so shy, not like camera
Mm-hmm.
shy. Well, I'm totally camera shy, but like microphone shy.
Mm-hmm.
And we would take shots to kind of get like loosen up and get ready for it. But it really, the name really came out of that. Like we're taking shots and we're speaking truth. And
Yeah.
yeah, here it is now. But yeah, we try to, talk about the hard things because we all are thinking it, right? We're all trying to find the words and language to process some of these things, and doing it collectively is so much more healthy and like I've just like felt this openness in our heart as a community that just like allows for conversation and allows for a lot of really beautiful things to happen, like build relationships.
That's incredible. And it's those things that we're afraid to talk about that when you bring light to it and create a space, yeah, like you said, I think can bring that kind of heart space and a place for people to express themselves and feel comfortable with like you said, things we're all thinking, but maybe afraid to talk about. And I noticed you had several posts, I believe, talking about detention and some of the difficult aspects of the immigration system. And I was really thrilled to see that because I think I told you in my day job, I do work with people who are detained. And that's not something that you hear a lot of people talking about on social media. So I was excited to hear you bringing light to that. And yeah, I'd love to hear just on that segue, like what has been your relationship with immigration?
Yeah, so I kind of want to go back a little bit and kind of touch on what you were saying in terms of having to bring up those types of things on social media. And it
Mhm.
really stemmed from connecting and being mentored at a very, I wouldn't say young age, but I was a lot younger, right? And
Mhm.
being mentored by people that were doing a lot of work around the detention center here in Tacoma.
Mhm.
And that was somebody who I still look up to very much. Her name is Marumora, who really taught me a lot of these things. And then I started kind of engaging with the work more and learning more and seeing parallels. And I was like, why aren't more people talking about this? And there's a sense of like wanting things to be nice and positive and good. And I'm all about that. Like I feel like I'm going through that also. But there's also a balance of like, all right, like where's the layers here? Like let's start unfolding those and having real conversations and making it uncomfortable, right? Um,
Yes.
I always strive to make the room uncomfortable, because if it's not, something's not working, there's not a shift happening, there has to be some kind of change.
Mm.
And yeah, that's kind of what we really strive for, is just being authentic, and even learning within us and as a community. That's like a constant with all this work.
This says so much about you as a leader, because it takes a particular type of leader to want to talk about the hard stuff and bring people along with that. And I don't think I made the connection of you being in Washington State with the Tacoma Detention Center, which I'm familiar with some of the advocacy work out there. And there's like incredible grassroots organizing that
Oh
happens
yeah.
with people who are detained there, that I think would be really interesting for people to hear about. I know I was fascinated when I first started learning about it, but like my understanding is it's one of the only, or it was one of the first places in the country where the main nonprofit there that provides legal services to immigrants like actively works with organizing people who are detained and having that inform their community organizing. Is that your understanding too?
Yeah, and I would say in addition to that, it's a lot of community leaders that really came together and were like, how can we look at the root of the problem? And the root of the problem are these carcinal institutions that are profiting off of our bodies. And so what they started doing was having so many, like encampments outside every weekend, every holiday,
Wow.
bringing people together, having, access to food and other things. And, like I mentioned, I was mentored by Maru Mora, who at the time, was really leading and participating in a hunger strike around this work. Maru and so many other organizers, right? There's so many people a part of the puzzle to make this all happen. And I was just like a tiny, tiny piece in it at one point in time, right? But it was all like very transformational in our lives to even work together on this. But right now, what they're looking at is that the Tacoma Detention Center is going down, which is great, right?
Really? Closing?
Um, yes, it is closing. The
Wow.
contract was not renewed with the city. Like I definitely don't know like enough to like tell you all the ins and outs and all the
Yeah.
details, but a lot of the reason that I started talking about these topics was because I was engaging with people at a younger age that were really pushing for this, right?
Mhm.
And I think that is different because there's so many of us that really focused on the dreamer narrative, DACA, and those are things we needed people to focus on, but we also needed other folks that were doing different work, right? And it's all valuable, it's all
100%.
important, it's all a part of our collective liberation, and learning collectively. That is literally what I see as our liberation, truly.
I'm so glad you're going there, and I haven't had a chance to talk with anyone on the podcast yet about this topic of like the good versus bad narrative, which I think you're alluding to, which is one of the challenges with like the immigration advocacy movement and pushing for this legalization for dreamers. Is it makes good versus bad immigrants, right? And I think it's so important that like in order to advance the rights of all immigrants, we have to fight for the people who are viewed or demonized as criminals, who are labeled as the bad immigrants, right? Because only if the people who are getting the worst of the worst treatment and are in prolonged detention and don't have rights and don't have access to counsel and all of this, only if their rights are being advanced will all immigrants' rights be advanced.
Hmm. Exactly. And it took me so long to get there, right? And I think it takes people a minute to get there because as an entire society, we are socialized to really, really internalize these things of this bad and good immigrant narrative, whether it's an economic variable narrative, whether it's a criminalizing narrative, whatever it is.
Mhm.
And we take this information in. So it takes an unlearning, it takes an awareness. Somebody said to me it was my roommate. She said, consciousness is hard.
Mm.
And that
Mhm.
shook me up because I was like, that's so real,
Yeah.
because you have to confront yourself. And honestly, more people try to like find every excuse to not confront X, Y, and Z. So I think it takes a lot of unlearning and a lot of conversations. And, I really think that it was the podcast that helped me get to a place of compassion, in learning how to listen to people and learning how to engage with folks and being empathetic and loving. Um, and that was not me
Mm.
even a year and a half ago, right?
Wow.
Um, yeah. And so I'm getting emotional because it's been a journey, right? A journey of healing, a journey of really pushing myself, and confronting the things that I, again, was internalized and socialized, as we all are, to
Mhm.
believe. And that stuff stems from social media. That stuff stems from the way that we talk about language, the way that, immigrants are portrayed in the media, but also how we portray each other as well, and the way that we talk about each other. I think so often we get lost in the idea that we're competing, that we're going up this ladder. But oh my God, and I'll never forget this. I've quoted this person so much. Their name is Ebony Harris, and they said, if I have to go up a ladder to succeed, I don't want to go up it, because if I'm going
Mhm.
up the ladder, that means there's people below me. So we have to remember, we got to get rid of that system.
Absolutely. And I mean, just to like bring it, big picture, what happens so much of who are the immigrants that are deemed bad immigrants and criminalized, it's just like all of the racism of the criminal legal system that gets duplicated in the immigration system.
Mhm.
So we just see obviously people of color being criminalized in their neighborhoods, being over policed. That leads to, as everyone knows, like so much injustice, so much racism in the criminal legal system. And then what the immigration system does is it's just this double punishment. And
Exactly.
the majority of people in immigration detention are coming from the legal system, and it's like they finished their sentence, they did what whatever their punishment was, and then they face like a double punishment and have to stay in immigration detention often for far longer, right? And it's so difficult to get out.
Yeah, and I actually, have a TED talk that I did several years ago, and it was really titled "The Criminalization, Exploitation, and Disposal of Immigrants," and
Yeah.
talking about the rhetoric that we use, down to the language, down to being exploited in the labor system as an economic narrative to allow white folks to enter into another sector of the economy,
Mhm.
the disposal of immigrants, and detention center, and the profit off of people's bodies. And I had to look at this a lot, and then came to meet somebody that literally was like my other half in some aspect. But we're like just like intimate friends. And he is somebody that was formerly incarcerated. And when we were constantly spending time together, we would have these conversations about our identities, like the barriers we were experiencing and navigating higher education and the workforce and just living in a border city, right?
Mhm.
And we really started thinking about how we could create something that highlighted the parallels of mass incarceration, mass detention, because there's no synergy. And it was my homie Hernan from Healing Ninjas, shout out to him,
Mhm.
who literally, I asked him, what do you think about the parallels of mass incarceration, mass detention? And he was like, well, first off, girl, there is no synergy between it.
Mhm.
And I think we need to once again confront that and be aware of that and start undoing those things, right?
Yeah. Oh, if I may, I just wanted to share quickly like how I got introduced to this area of, because I actually spent like the past, I would say the first 5 years in my career working at the intersection of criminal and immigration law, which I never
Mm,
expected. And I spent a lot of time doing that. And the reason I got introduced was I was down at the border in Texas for an internship. I went down to represent asylum seekers who were detained at the Port Isabel Detention Center, which is in South Texas near Harlingen, McAllen area. And
McAllen, yeah.
I was there, I would be in the room in the detention center with the new people arriving who are asylum seekers, and in the room next to me through the glass there was one attorney at the nonprofit who would meet with all the people who weren't asylum seekers. And I would see these people who like were far more American than me. They, they didn't have accents. They had been here like 20, 30 years. They had US citizen children. They had green cards and they were being deported. And it was such a wake up call. And I was like, why is that happening? So I just wanted to share that to like give people a concrete idea of what's going on. And yeah, I'd love if you have any kind of visuals you could describe of how this plays out, because I think it's hard for people to grasp. Like even just like what does the Tacoma Detention Center look like, or or any stories you want to share of what you've seen.
Yeah. It's like so interesting to talk about these things. And thank you for sharing everything you said. That's amazing. I didn't know that about you. So I like want to ask you questions. But it's so, I think it's important to name and like sense also where there's a balance of the way that we move with this kind of work, right? In a way that isn't glorifying it either, because I think as immigrants, as people, all folks glorify some part of this experience, and part of that being the trauma bonding that happens amongst
Mhm.
folks, and also wanting to find that collective healing, etc. But some of the things, at the Tacoma Detention Center, one of the times that I slept out there at the encampment, um, I was asked to go inside and interview somebody, and I didn't know what I was doing. I was like a kid. I was like, what am I doing? And it was just like, one of those experiences that you don't forget.
Mhm.
Where I was standing in the detention center, like I walked in and these like people were being nice and offering support. And I was like, get the fuck out. Don't even try to be nice to me right now. Like I'm pissed. And what was really hard about that time too was that my cousin was detained in that detention center, and like I couldn't even see him. I couldn't interact with him, and I felt so like just kind of like so close and so far away from him.
Wow.
Yeah, I
I
couldn't
can
sleep that whole
imagine.
night, and I was just like in a tent outside. And I only did the encampments a handful of times, but like I remember that one being one of the most impactful ones. Um, Another thing I think of, is I did have a chance to go down to McAllen and the border, which I have a few friends there that I want to name and honor, being Priscilla Aguilar, Abraham Diaz, Karina, so many Giovanni, so many people that have really like been able to at least express what it's like to live in that border city area,
Mhm. Mhm.
because I also live in a border city but in the northern side, right? I live 30
Mhm.
minutes from Canada. And so our experiences are vastly different, though we all live in a border city, and we've had a lot of discussions around how so many people talk about the border everywhere but have never been there or visited or
Yeah.
seen how lovely the communities are there and how beautiful it is, and all the magic that is there, right?
Yes.
So I want to say that, and also say that it was a wake up call when I went and experienced that. It was one of a geographical privilege. It was one of privilege. It was one of seeing what that was like to see a highly militarized area where that's not as much the case here.
Mhm.
Um, I think it was also a very emotional experience, one that I often turn to kind of understand things a little bit more. And for the first time, in my life, I like, even though I have felt caged for so long, for the first time, I got to see it, right? I saw that fucking wall. I saw the Rio Grande
Mhm.
River. I saw people at that bus station waiting to get a bus back to Mexico. Like, it was
Mm.
it was a lot to swallow. And I think, the way that I got through that again was leaning in to my brothers and sisters from the Dream Lead Institute and those that I named.
Wow. Yeah, I'm just thinking of my first experience when I was there, seeing the actual border too, and like having so much anticipation and emotion seeing it. And I'm sure my experience was very, very different from yours, given the privileges I have. But yeah, I can only imagine what that was like. And it's really, I don't even know the word. I want to say powerful, but it's not the right word, of viscerally seeing it and feeling,
Hmm.
right? like touching it. I don't know if you got to like
Yeah,
physically.
I did.
It was really hard to understand, but like crazy. I actually was like looking around at the border when I was there, and just driving around with a friend, and like ice showed up. It was crazy. And I was at some random farm. Um, yeah, it's such a militarized area, as you said. But I want to bring the conversation to the finances of all this, because this is the Immigrant Finance Podcast, and you started to mention the economic incentives behind detention. So let's talk about that a little bit for people to understand, why there are so many immigrants detained, and why that number has drastically increased over the last few decades. So what are your insights on kind of the role of finances and all of this?
Oh goodness, I wish I had been more prepared for that question. But really,
No pressure. No pressure.
So, one of the things that I really came to quickly learn was that in the system of capitalism, that means, again, that ladder, people are at the top, people are at the bottom. And the way that are forced into the bottom is by dehumanizing them, by exploiting them, by disposing of them, in which how the carceral state exists of disposing people's bodies, and profiting off of it, including in providing labor within jail systems and detention centers, right, that do not pay livable wages, that can't actually buy you a phone call or an actual meal, right? Yeah. So there's various layers within that, between labor, the exploitation of people's bodies for profit, um, and what that does when you take that community out of the economic system, the American economic system, because now it's going to be really hard for that person to be introduced back into it when they're not able to get a job, when they're not able to, um, have a house when they get released, if they don't have family. There's various levels where we can look at this. Another one that I really bring up is the like economic variable narrative that, we have to justify our existence in this country by graduating from here, from making all this money here, from, giving, like providing in some way. And I really like to challenge that, because as amazing and beautiful as our successes are, right? Because we are a powerful community, as a whole, we all are. And though there's room to celebrate that and give love to that, I think there's something that happens when we do that, is that we forget people, and we forget the people that are highly impacted and mostly impacted. I always say, like, I hate it when I hear people say, because I did it, you can do it, because they don't look at the circumstance. They don't look at the situation. Maybe that person didn't have the emotional support, financial support, um, the help to create the vision, whatever it is, we don't know. And so I think the economic variable narrative is one that has internalized us to believe that if we don't succeed in this country and provide in this country, we're not worthy. And I think that we perpetuate that on other people too.
It's a really, really, sorry, my phone's ringing. That's a really important point, and I think something that I need to think a lot about more in my work in immigrant finance, on empowering people in the financial system, because there is a degree of being complicit in what you just described and buying into those narratives. It's such a needle to thread, right?
Yeah.
It really is, because it's like you want to be able to be empowered and have options for yourself and your family, and be able to have control when there's a lot of uncertainty, but also not perpetuate this system. So that's something I've been thinking a lot about. And I had one client I worked with in our program who really, really pushed me to think about questioning investing in the stock market, and led me to look more into like socially conscious investing,
Mm.
all of that, and thinking more broadly about investing. Um, because let's be real, if you're investing in the stock market, you are likely contributing to these companies that incarcerate people. They own a lot of the pie, right?
Yeah.
And so just thinking broader about investing as like not only the stock market, there's lots of ways. There's investing in yourself. There's investing in a business, in your something you're creating, growing. There's investing in real estate. There's different ways, but yeah, it is something to really think carefully about. So I
And
appreciate
we
you.
can't lose ourselves, right? We can't forget that we are human before we're investors. And I think
Right.
that's where the switch is. And I think that's where we need to find that, again, that consciousness of how do we go about this? And how do we
Mhm.
bring others with us, like you all do on this great platform? I just actually quickly thought of another kind of economic piece that I think is important to name because I think so many people aren't connecting it and it's driving me bonkers. Um, and that is the militarization of this country.
Oh yeah.
Um, that it is the military, the reason that we have economic issues, environmental issues.
Mhm.
The military is very present in all of these things. And I think that's another place where there's no synergy, where there's no connection back to it. And I wanted to name it because I'm
Yeah.
trying to confront that more.
Yeah. Yeah, and what that makes me think about when I think about that is like why I'm so excited for people in the immigrant community to be building wealth and building power because there's a different way this economy could look if there were different people who had ownership in it. Like the
100%.
choices we're making currently as a society are completely out of alignment with the majority of people's values, most likely, right? And it's like we're putting like most of the country's money into the military as you're describing, and like not at all anything comparable whatsoever in things that actually matter, like schools and healthcare and
Hmm.
education. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, and even the story of how many immigrants went into the military at different points in history to get naturalized, right? They would come
Yeah.
here, get their citizenship, and then be sent back to their home countries to fight against their countries. Like
Oh,
there's so many pieces, right?
yeah.
And I just want to connect them more. I want to have conversations with people more about it because I'm always learning. Like I don't fucking know everything, and I want people to know that like I don't know everything. I'm always wanting to engage with the work and learn with it from a place
Yeah.
of compassion, from a
Yeah.
place of having an open heart. And I hope that, more folks join us to do that.
I really appreciate that, and I think it just underscores this overall point of like how much finances plays a role in all of this and why the things are the way they are and who has power and all of that. So that kind of leads me to the next thing I want to ask you about, which is this theme of, people creating new types of businesses and entrepreneurship that could look different than how things are. So, how has your experience been with entrepreneurship and starting a online presence, starting a podcast, building something on your own?
Yeah. So first I have to say that like I'm very recently struggling with like, when did I start calling myself an entrepreneur? Why did I start using this language? Like, how does this fit into this white professionalism bubble? And again, my role in society as I'm navigating this as a conscious person, right? Um, but
Mm-hmm.
I did not start it thinking that it was going to do what it's doing now. I did not think that it would grow as much as it has. And I think that was, part of it was switching my mindset around that, right? Confronting that. But starting this podcast has literally changed my life, y'all. It has
Wow.
allowed me to manage my time better. It has held me accountable to myself, to my community. It has allowed me to meet people like you and like other really amazing folks that are investing back into our communities in a different way. So if you have a passion, a project, or something that you're just aching to create, like if I could leave you with anything, it's that. Like go ahead and try to do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's how it all started. We just jumped in, did it, and hoped for the best.
Yeah, you're such a testament to just getting started. That's something I'm always telling the people that we work with who are thinking about starting online businesses. It's just like you just have to get started, and all of the things that get in the way are just mindset things, as you said, like imposter syndrome, fear of judgment, perfectionism. I mean, the list goes on. Those are things that hold us back, but there's so much potential right now to create in general, and also create a new way of how things could be. Uh,
Yeah.
right? Like nothing like what you're doing existed very recently. Like someone having a public platform where they can say whatever they want and build
Mm-hmm.
something and reach people and have no limit to that. It's incredible.
Yeah, and I love that, right? Like I'd always say like it's our terms, like all of this is on our terms. We get to decide how this content is produced. We get to
Mhm.
decide how we share this with the world, and I think that's really powerful when we take the microphone, we take those platforms, and we own them, right? I think so often I ask myself like, why me? Why am I doing this work? And then I'm like, well, nobody else did, so here I am, and other people have and started, right? And that's beautiful, and I love that I'm working with folks to like build each other up and learn from each other. That's part of the healing process. It's a collective one too. Again, like there's so much healing that I've done because of this work, and I'm grateful for everybody that's been a part of it.
That's amazing. What was it like when you first picked up the microphone, or talking into your computer or your phone, crying? Like, were you freaking out?
Oh my gosh, it was so hard. It was so hard. Like, I don't know if this is just me, but I'm somebody that can't really focus on like more than one thing at once. And this is not just me. A lot of folks experience this, obviously, but like I was having such a hard time just sitting and listening. And like, I think that's something that taught me how to do is literally sit and listen and have an open conversation with somebody. It's funny that you say like it takes a specific type of person that can do this work. And I think it's meeting people with an open heart that really makes the work happen.
Mm.
Um, so I totally like spaced on your question just now.
No, no. I just realized when you said that, that's like you've mentioned the word heart multiple times, and that really says a lot and is incredible. That is something that I really love about this online space too, and creators who are doing that, creating from the heart. It's so apparent when someone is versus not,
Totally.
and it's like when you're doing that, you don't need ads, paid ads. You don't need like all these funnels and shit, right? It's just like
Yeah.
it's like you just do that and it speaks to people, and that is going to grow far more sustainably than something that's just like for the money.
Exactly. And you know, the somebody keeps just telling me like just keep going, just keep doing it, right? And I think that's really the rhythm. And I had this kind of like weird epiphany of like, okay, I have to find a way to keep creating this work and making it better. But that's hard when there's two of us, right? I think so many people don't see all the behind the scenes work, right? That is so consuming, that is so much.
Yeah.
But again, it's so educational, so self learning. Um, but I really, want to see this podcast as a part of the work I do, not my end all. And I really want folks to know that too, because I don't think that I'll be doing this podcast forever. I really think I'm doing it now, putting my heart and soul into it, and hoping that it takes me to another place in life where I can sit more with a lot of the things that I learned through it.
What are you envisioning, if you're comfortable talking about that at all? I'm just
Well, I'm
curious.
I have a couple ideas on writing, self-publishing,
Oh, that makes
kind of building my speaker platform more because, I'm not trying to capitalize off of our community at all. I'm trying to make money from the white institutions and shit, right? I'm here to do the hard work with us and get paid up there. So I'm really trying to like build that for myself, and go into consulting and go into a space where I can talk about these things more and look back and have more knowledge, right? And I think it's something we need to approach as a lifelong thing.
Mhm.
It's not just I started this podcast 3 years ago. It's, hey, I've been having this experience all my life and I've been wanting to connect with people. I've had the desire to meet other folks and build relationship with them. And now it's manifesting into this for now. And it's going to manifest into other things in the future. Um, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's a whirlwind of like so much work, right?
Yes. Yeah, and I'd love to ask you about kind of the challenges you're currently going through, just for people to know and normalize that people who are creating and building things always have challenges. And I always say it's like all entrepreneurs are constantly having emotional ups and downs and
Oh yeah,
insecurities and fears, and it's like super manic, and people just don't talk about it. So, so to normalize
100%.
that a little bit, like what's going on? What is like your growing edge right now?
My growing edge is that I've been working on this platform for the last 6 months pretty consistently, where we've been releasing weekly episodes, where I just quit my job and started doing this and nothing but this.
Yay,
And
congrats.
thank you. But I'm at a turning point where I need to reassess where we're going from here, right? How can we level up our work a little bit more? How can we make things a little cleaner? How can we incorporate more content on our social media platforms? How can we include video, right? How do we get transcribed? All these things. And so I think it's the point where we're like, all right, we need to level up. How are we going to do this? Let's all like, and like I said, it's me and somebody else doing this work, Caleb Nelson, and it's hard. It's hard, y'all. I think something else that I'm really, going through and just kind of accepting is like, the more that you release your work, the more that you're out there, the more people are going to have opinions and thoughts. And like, that's okay. Like, not everybody's going to vibe with your work, and that's fine. There's people that are here for it. There's people that are going to cheer you on and support you and want to work with you and build with you. And I think sometimes we're afraid, right? And I'm afraid all the time. Whenever I release stuff, sometimes I get anxiety and I have to cope with that and deal with it and move through it. So
Yes.
I just, what's up?
Oh, I'm just agreeing.
Yeah. So I think it's just like so much around emotion for me. I'm such an emotional person. But also around wanting more for myself, wanting to grow this more, wanting to to reap the benefits of all the hard work we've been doing, right?
Absolutely. And you hit on something so important I want to highlight, which is like not everyone is going to agree with you. I totally relate to that. I consider myself a former people pleaser. So that's often my growing edge. Like I'm trying to be more open about it. But my big thing has always been like fear of judgment.
Mm,
And I just think that's really important that you are talking about it and how that does happen, especially as you get more visible and just like mathematically, the more people you're interacting with and are hearing you, the more likely there's going to be people who disagree with you or don't vibe with you, and that's okay. And just to accept that not everyone's going to like
exactly.
you, right? I think that's
Yeah.
important for
And then
people.
I think so too. And, I agree with your fear of judgment thing. I feel like so, and I think again, that's something that was socialized in us to really fear like what other people thought of us. And so,
Yeah,
um, yeah, sorry, are you able to edit some of this stuff?
I will.
Okay, cool. Because my roommate just texted me and I was like, oh no, we got the bing.
No worries. I'm going to put the timestamp down so I can edit it.
Cool. Um,
Yeah, take your time.
sorry, I lost my train of thought. Like I said, I can only focus on one thing at once. It's the worst.
It's totally fine. We were talking about fear of judgment.
Yeah, so I really had to come to a point where it just was like not my main focus of how I was moving forward with this work. And somebody said something to me that I love, and they were like, nadie tiene tu sazón. And that's like nobody has what you bring. So like if you're gonna bring it to your fullest and like authentically, and like we've been talking about, from the heart.
Sorry, I just got muted, so I'm gonna edit that again.
You're good.
Yeah, I totally agree. I heard something the other day that helped me rethink in a different way, pretty profoundly, this stuff about fear of judgment that has crippled me for so long.
Mm.
Because you mentioned being scared a lot or having fear, and I totally relate. Like, I people will say to me like, "How did you do that?" or whatever. I'm like, I'm fucking terrified all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, somebody called me fearless once, and I was like, "Girl, do you know me? Like, I'm scared of everything."
Yeah. 100%. One of the first guests I had on the podcast, Erica Johnson, I was talking with her about this. And she's like this really successful tech startup leader person in San Francisco. And she was saying how she's scared all the time too. And like every single amazing thing she's done, she's just been terrified. And we were like, yeah. And then we're just both like, oh shit, I'm going to throw up. Let's do it. You know?
Oh, right. You just gotta feed off of those nerves. Like right before I present, I get super, super nervous and I start like coughing and feeling like anxious. And then I start talking and that all goes away.
Yeah, exactly. You have to go through your shit, and then you probably get in your zone of genius, you know. But it's so much work to get there. And so the quote I was gonna say that I heard this week that was really amazing was, "Fear of judgment really comes down to prioritizing more what other people think of you more than what you think of yourself."
Mm,
Isn't that good?
yeah, it is.
And I was like,
uh,
wow, I didn't even realize that I wasn't focusing on how I view myself.
mm. Yeah, and I think we need to like remind ourselves like something I always like to do is like before bed, I like to do my little self-care routine, right? And like give myself words of affirmation of like, "Oh my gosh, you're cute" or something.
Mhm.
And I think that goes back to, just really centering and loving self.
Yeah. So how has that been important for you in this journey of building your online presence and being visible and all of that? Has that been an important piece of it?
Yeah, I think, if you would have asked me 3 years ago that I had to face and do some inner work and healing, I would have been like, okay, who do you think you are to tell me that? And I think now I've been able to confront some of those things and do some of that work, and it's really transformational. Transformational of like mind, body, spirit, like feeling, my being alternate and looking at the world differently. And that has really been because of the conversations I've had with people. I went from being somebody that was
Oh,
so
Victoria, I just
angry and
lost
so mad, and
you.
I still am, right? But it just in a different way. I can release it in a different way, understand it in a different way. Whereas now, yeah, it's um, it's about healing, right? And when you come together with the intention of building a relationship, there's so much more that happens in healing, and it's really magical. And I'm really again stoked to see it happen because people tell me all the time after I interview with them, I feel so good. I'm riding off this high, and I'm like,
Mm,
I sure hope so because I am too.
awesome.
Um, so yeah, it's been a part of the journey for sure.
What and to bring this kind of full circle, what does it mean to you for to have more people in the immigrant community specifically doing this inner work and speaking up more and sharing their ideas? Like what would the world look like to you and why is that important?
I think something happens when we center our healing for the first time, because again, we can confront things that we didn't even know were there, things that we desensitized from, things that we found to kind of bandage some of those wounds, right? And for me, that was like alcohol, for example. So, I think that when we start wanting to do that work, we start healing self. And when you start healing yourself, you have the ability to pour into other people. And when you have the ability to pour into other people, we get to this place of healing collectively. And I think that's the next step, right? I think so much has been and that's part of it, again, the self and then collective healing. And I think something's going to happen during this collective healing where again we're able to approach each other with much more compassion. We're able to sympathize and empathize and hear and see, right? um and I think for so long that wasn't the case. I feel like so long we were socialized and internalized to be very competitive towards each other. And I see us moving away from that. So I really encourage folks like to sit down, to write, to draw, to breathe. I listen to frequencies all the time. And I know that's like so odd, but like it really helps me just kind of connect to myself in a different way. So, when you do your self healing, it's also collective. And I really invite folks to get to the place in their lives where they can do that.
Thank you so much for sharing that beautiful vision, really, and seeing kind of what is the light at the end of the tunnel with all of the change happening right now. We're in such a moment of transformation. there's so much uncertainty. So your positivity and community empowerment outlook is really empowering to hear.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Victoria. I appreciate all your wisdom you've shared with our community. Please let folks know how they can follow you and support you.
Yes, of course. Again, thank you so much for having me. I would said all these things and was all over the place. So I hope at least some of it makes sense.
It all
Um,
makes sense.
It's coming from a place of tenderness, feeling really tender and moving through the waves of coming down from feelings and emotions. And so I
Mhm.
hope that in some way people know that it's coming from that place and that take what feels right, leave what doesn't, and move through it, right? So people can find me at shattertruthpodcast.com. That is the same for all of our social media platforms, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. I am much more active on Instagram than anything else. So please feel free to connect. I love hearing from y'all, love connecting with y'all. I'm also down to share any content you want me to share around resources for Undocu folks, resources for immigrant folks. We're collectively doing this, and I think that's important. You can also I'm actually not accepting personal friend requests on my personal quite yet, just because I'm feeling the need to protect myself and my energy too. And I think that's something we all have to practice. But please connect with me via Shadow Truth Podcast and check out our website too, where you can learn how to hire me and bring me in to speak at your school, your workplace, institution, whatever that is.
Incredible. Thank you so much, Victoria. I really appreciate your time and sharing all of your wonderful perspective in general, and for enlightening our community. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Take care, everybody.
Take care.